CRNA Financial Planning is a sponsor of Beyond the Mask podcast. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Plus, did you know listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits? For details on how to submit, visit the CE credit section at beyondthemaskpodcast.com. Welcome to the Beyond the Mask podcast. This is the Anesthesia Alchemy edition. Join hosts Gary Bridges and Lynn Maxey as they deep dive into today's most important clinical conversations.
Welcome back, listeners, to Anesthesia Alchemy, Lynn and Garry Unplugged. So today...
Hi, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
Hi, y'all. How you doing?
Great.
Well, we're also welcoming Meri Gilman-Mays.
Yes.
And we're getting ready to discuss addressing incivility as a leader in nurse anesthesia.
Absolutely.
And I wonder how many listeners out there have faced incivility amongst their colleagues, both CRNAs, MDAs, surgical nurses, all of the folks that we work with. I'm sure we all can tell lots of stories about that. But how do we address it? And how do we make it better? How do we improve relationships in our work world?
So, all right, we're going to ask a few questions with Meri. And our first area that we really want to look at, and I think we've talked about this in the last episode, Meri, is that CRNAs are leaders, whether they're in formal or informal roles. And so we really want to look at leadership beyond the title. And that's, whether a nurse anesthetist is the chief CRNA, a lead, or at the bedside, in the OR, or even on a committee, our leadership roles. But, sort of how do I identify sort of some of those subtle cues that incivility is in progress, and then are there interventions there for us to be able to offset and deal and address with incivility?
You're absolutely right, Gary. Whether you are a chief, an assistant chief, staff CRNA, we're all leaders of our own domain. And we talked last time about, you can only change your own behavior. You cannot change others. So basically, when you wake up in the morning and you have the hat to put on, are you going to put I'm going to have a good day and be positive and show respect as respect is given to me? Or are you going to put I'm going to stir the pot and I'm going to make everybody miserable today? And everybody has that choice. So, it really just needs to come from I really do believe it starts with the single person and how they are going to interact that day. I can't say enough about the positive attitude. And Lynn mentioned earlier about, I'm not going to take it if somebody is talking down to me or belittling me or bullying me, but there are respective avenues that if that is happening, this is, I was chief at Duke and then chief at the Cleveland Clinic. If this is happening, you really need to have trust in your leader and go up the hierarchy. If you've got a bully or a situation where, somebody is really being incivil to you, don't take it upon yourself because you're not going to be able to change that person's mind. This is where you need to trust in your leadership system. That's what
I will try it myself once.
Yes, agree.
I will stand up and say, hey, did you really mean to say that? Do you really think saying that is okay?
Yes.
And then based on their behavior and just saying, it's not okay for me. So we need to figure out a way through this.
Right.
And
but
then if we can't.
Would you do that as a student or a young CRNA?
Oh, yeah. I'd do it to anybody. You know me.
Well, you're Lynn.
Yeah.
But in general, I don't know.
I did it to heart surgeons.
There you go.
They're bullies. They can be bullies.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, we're not talking like that to each other today. I don't speak to you that way. And I'm asking you not to speak to me that way. What would you like to say to me now? Would you like to be nice? Would you like to be civil? Would you like to be respectful?
Yes. So it sounds like you're talking to a toddler.
So
you can say the same thing you just said to a toddler. And how sad is that? That we even have to go there and say that sentence.
So this brings up sort of, I guess, the concept of modeling professionalism particularly under pressure. Now, that could be a clinical event, or that could be just an interpersonal event within our high stress work environments. Question for y'all is, do you have professionalism committees that actually hold and help hold accountability or evaluate scenarios when people have issues in the workplace?
I've never been on one. We had a surgeon at one of my hospitals who was, I'm sure he was a lovely man, but he was burnt out. He needed to retire, and he would yell and scream at the circulator or the tech at the bedside. And it was being handled by people way above us. But there was a day where the CRNA, he never yelled at the CRNAs, but the CRNA leaned over the drape and went, "Stop talking to her like that." Mm-hmm. And he was so taken back. They kind of got into a row about it, but the CRNA just stood his ground. And I think that people who bully are used to getting away with it. And I think that if, like, I try it funny first time, go, "Really? Really? Did you want to say that to me that way?" But then I get very serious if they get aggressive with me and go, "No, I'm sorry. This isn't going to happen this way." Then if I have to, I take it to higher powers. But I will say something to them first. I don't wait to just go tattle, and it's not tattling, but I want them to look at me and say, "Oh, I can't act that way because she's not going to let me." And I've ended up getting along with a lot of my surgeons way better after I stand up to them, because then they're like, "Oh, okay, I'm not going to give her the hard way." So
really, we haven't had many committees, or it's too bad because you say that, Gary, and I'm like, oh, I probably should have done that. Yeah. But one solution that really helped at one of the hospitals was a suggestion box.
Yeah.
The word anonymity is huge because people are so fearful of repercussion and retaliation.
Yep, absolutely.
And in that suggestion box, Lord, if I can tell you the things that came out in that suggestions box, and really we ended up actually terminating a CRNA for being a bully. And there was so, you all know if it's not down, it never happened.
Yeah.
But there was so much evidence and things that they were doing, and the fear, not only from the CRNAs, but the circulating nurse and the surgeons were afraid of her.
Wow.
And she smacked a student's hand when they went to pre-oxygenate. I mean, just the stuff that came out of that suggestion box, so that might be, it sounds, trivial, but it might be a solution if you're having a lot of problems.
So there's an emerging tactic that certainly the larger academic centers are starting to do now, and that is having professionalism committees, and they actually take these things to task. So when there are issues, they evaluate them, and they actually sit whoever that is that's involved in the conflict down so that they can develop it. Now, you and I may have a conflict. We go sit down and have, a conversation with committee chair or a member of the committee of the professionalism committee. Fine, all is done. Nobody's punished for it. However, I may get called in again for another different conflict, and now we have a trend starting to ensue. Right. And so I think that, for our listeners, that if you should look up and make sure that, if you're in a large center, do you have professionalism committees? It's one starting point, right? If you don't, it may be worth something asking to, like the suggestion box, I think are very important conduits for people that are in conflict, that they in civil behaviors and whatnot, to be able to share and voice those types of things. You're starting to see a lot of organizations. I don't know how effective they are with employee engagement surveys, right? Quite honestly, I think a lot of that stuff gets scrubbed, which is very easy to do, or sanitized, because some layers don't want to address the accountability issues, right? Because it's uncomfortable, but it needs to be done. I can tell you, this is quite some time ago, well over a decade ago, I had a few individuals that were very, very toxic in the lounge. And it took a lot of work to investigate, finally identified, had sit downs with these individuals and kind of said, this is the temperament that's being shared with me from your peers. And it needs to stop. So today it stops. If it does not, we will have a conversation again, and then we will now embark against territory that I prefer not to do, and I'm asking you to not do, so that we don't get into what's the leadership terminology is realignment, right? And showing them
Consequences for your behavior.
Exactly.
Again, toddlers.
So
Again, totally toddlers. But I will say to that point, Gary, that especially in big academic centers, it's very, very hard to get somebody terminated.
yes,
Particularly if there's a behavioral issue. Clinically, not talking about that. But you get your warning. You just let's sit
Right.
down and talk about it. Then you get your first written warning. Then you get the final
Right,
warning. Then
right.
it goes to committee and
Yeah.
it gets turned over. And it's very hard to address.
yeah, it's like a cat with 9 lives,
Yes.
I
right?
do think it's important, though, that they have to address it. Like the CRNA that you worked with, Gary, who picked up that green towel of everything the student had put together. She wouldn't get to have students from there on in. I don't care how good she is.
Well, they
when you're
didn't.
mean to somebody like that,
Yeah.
there's no need for that. There's no excuse for that.
Yeah. Well, that pattern and then that trend continued, and it bled into other individuals besides students. It was other CRNAs, it was physicians. And so eventually that resulted in what was coming, and it did. But anyway, so question for you two is sort of responding to incivility real time. Like, when do you address it immediately, and when do you address it later? I mean, obviously there's some obvious ones, but sort of give us some examples of that.
I have done it later.
Is it as effective?
The way I do it is. I tried to take, this is before anesthesia, and I had this cardiologist. They had floated me to the floor, God save me, and I hear this knock on the door. This little old lady's naked, laying in the bed. I'm trying to bathe her. This cardiologist waltzes in his 3-piece suit because he was just too important for it to wait. And I quickly threw a blanket on the woman, and then he did what he did and walked out. And 2 days later, I saw him in the unit, and I leaned over, and like I said, I tried to do it funny the first time. I said, someday you're going to be a little old man laying in a bed.
All
and
naked.
Your nurse is trying to clean you, and there's going to be a knock on the door. And this beautiful blonde cardiologist with her 3-inch heels is going to walk in and see your little woo-woo. And your nurse is going to try to protect you. And with this, he's starting to understand what I'm doing. And he goes to pick up the phone. And this is back in those days. And I put my finger on the button. I said, oh, I'm not done. You horrified that woman because you're just too important to wait. So could you please use your manners? Have a nice day. And I took my finger off the thing. I never had another problem with it. I mean, it's just, I try to do it funny.
Yes.
And I tried to build this ego at the same time by saying, oh, a beautiful cardiologist, because he's just so handsome. He thinks so. You just smooth the ego a little bit, but you get your point across.
Yes.
What about you, Meri?
I was just so enthralled with Lynn's story.
Woo-woo.
You know, I was in theater in high school.
Yes, I was so enthralled with Lynn's story. Gary, lost my train of thought.
Times that you would do like immediate versus delay sort of
Yes.
addressing issues.
If somebody's being really ugly to me and I can't get away from it, I will address it right then, right there.
Yes.
But if I think that I can talk to them in a little while, or there were patients around, I had a doctor yell at me one time in the pre-op area, and I waited because there was patients there, and I waited, but I went to my charge nurse, the OR charge, and I said, I need to sit down with this physician and you. I said, this is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. So she calls him in, and we ended up talking it out, but it was like, look, you don't get to do that. What do the patients think?
Yeah.
I exactly. The problem with immediate, so be it, is nothing is immediate in what we do. We're in a scenario where, am I going to address this now? I'm giving anesthesia to a patient, or
Right,
I'm in the pre-op area in front of 50 nurses. So immediate is definitely hard. And it's also hard to find that one-on-one time to address the person you're having an issue with. Our lives as CRNAs are very different. We're in rooms. We don't have time to chit chat. So where do we chit chat? We chit chat in the lounge.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that there's been many times where I've hunted the person down and really tried to pick out 5 minutes of both our times and addressed it instead of bringing it into the lounge. And I've gotten actually, thank you so much for, addressing this. I was having a bad day. I'm glad it didn't go into the lounge kind of thing. And I've also had the total, I'm going to you are just pissing me off. And I'm, now we're not friends.
Yeah.
So immediate versus later, sometimes we don't have a choice but to do it later. And later might be better when everybody comes down. I don't know. Unless you're like Lynn said, the surgeon's screaming at you over the drape. Oh, no, that's an immediate.
And the patient's asleep. And it's not like the rest of the staff in the room doesn't know what's going on.
Exactly.
And so by my handling it and just saying, this is unacceptable,
Yes.
Yeah, I think
that's an immediate.
When it gets addressed and it gets its net effect, I think the coworkers that are actually witnessing it and it being addressed and people being held accountable or removed from the workplace, there's this level of sigh of relief is, I guess, the best way. I can tell you this individual that was ill towards students, when they finally were removed from the institution, people actually came and thanked for removing that individual. And it was across all disciplines, surgeons, physicians.
It ruins people's days to work with people like that.
It goes back to culture, right? Is what culture do you want your people to participate in? It's certainly not a toxic one, right? With that being said, now when we're dealing with individuals, what are some of the techniques to sort of de-escalate those behaviors that we're witnessing in the workplace?
Well, first I take a big deep breath.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly
very good. Yeah.
And I get myself under control, and I'm very, very conscious of how I feel. Like what you just said to me embarrassed me. I'm very uncomfortable right now.
Yep.
I need you to understand that that's unacceptable, that you do not get to speak to me like that. I try to do it professionally. I try to do it nice. But when I'm really angry like that, I don't do funny. I'm very calm and very professional, but I draw a line in the sand.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it totally goes back again. You can only control what you do and your emotions and how you handle it. So if you're going to escalate, then it's going to be, you doing it. That person's ready to come at you. If the situation is so toxic that you feel like saying, what are you talking about? Are you really talking to me like that? It's going to escalate. Right. So it's all about how you handle yourself.
Yeah.
Do you take a deep breath? I love that stuff. Take a deep breath, count to 10, whatever you need to do, find the right time. It's just, there's a time and a place. And I honestly believe that we all have the control to de-escalate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's a responsibility. We all are responsible to do that correctly, right? So one of the other questions that I had was around not just neutral tone when we're dealing with individuals and sort of presenting the facts versus the emotions, but where do you do that? Is it in the environment? And I think both of you have alluded to this, is that unless it's really escalated to a level to where it's intolerable, completely inappropriate, obviously it gets nipped in the bud right there. But to Meri's point, also is trying to track people down. And I'll share a story with you. I had an individual that I had hired, very, very skilled new graduate, and was doing okay, I think, for the first few months. And then I noticed sort of the behavior of just interacting in the hallways, kind of snippety, and then bitching in the lounge. And so the way I addressed it, and I had some feedback from individuals, and I said, you know what, I'm going to come in extra early. And so when that person comes in, I'll nab them I'll just have them as float for the day. And so I brought him in the office and I said, look, I'm getting some feedback that you're perhaps a little toxic at times and very negative in your demeanor. And he kind of like looked at me, was starting to get a little, you know how you hold people accountable sometimes, you can watch it's not flushing, their face actually gets really white. Getting ready to go cyanotic. And I watched the Adam's apple kind of tug down to his clavicles. And I said, do you like working here? I said, honestly, like, there's no heart, like, it's not for everybody, but are you like not enjoying this environment? And they were really guarded in their response. And I said, it's okay. Like, if you're not happy, then I don't want to put you through torture. And if there's a way we can make this productive and you need to go somewhere else, take the time to think about it. And I will definitely write you a reference letter to help you get the job that you want. But if this is not for you, then tell me, because we're doing each other a disservice. Like, I don't want to be calling you back in the office another 3 months if you're just miserable, right? And
Absolutely.
so they spilled out. They're like, yeah, I get stuck all the time. I'm trying to have a family and blah, blah. I said, okay, I can appreciate it. So our responsibility in the leadership role is, can I change your schedule to make it more palatable? And he said, well, I've tried 3 or 4 different schedules and it just doesn't work. And I said, okay, fine. What do you want to do? And kind of like looked at his shoes and I said, it's okay. You don't have to be embarrassed, but if you're showing up every day miserable and imparting your misery on everybody else around you, then it's okay to leave. It's okay, you know? And he goes, yeah, I think I'll think about it another day or two and then, make my decision, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to leave. I said, you can leave now if you want. Like, there's no harm in if you're, and I said, the fact that you walk out of the parking lot and get in your car, you're probably going to have a big sigh of relief. I said, I want to give you permission. That's what I want to do, right? There's no heartfelt. He handed his badge right there and says,
Wow.
I want to leave. I said, okay. I mean, if you feel that, I hope it's a weight off your shoulder. And I think one of the things in formal leadership roles is to give individuals the permission that they've been identified as not being well, number one. Number two is, it's not okay to put that onto your coworkers. And number three, I'm giving you permission to determine your course of action. Do you want to work on it here or do you want to leave? And it's okay to leave. It's not failure. It's okay to leave, right? Now, that being said, that was, I think, successful departure for both of us. Question I have is, how would you manage it in a student role that has a clinical, let's say clinical director, maybe even in some cases program director, that isn't nimble enough or approachable enough to be able to help the student manage those environments?
Well, I will say this, that I cannot tell you how many people, when I speak about this topic and people come up to me after and say, what do you do if you feel you can't go to your leader?
Yeah.
What do you do?
What do you do?
If the leader is intimidating, or I'm not going to say bullying because what a mess, but what do you do if you can't even go to your leader? So here's where, do you take it upon yourself? I also taught at Duke, the leadership class at Duke for the Duke students. And one of the big things was, I'll give you an example. It was great because that was kind of our feeder pool. And that's how we kept the staffing going and going.
Right.
We formed this connection with the students and it was great. So I had a student come in. He wasn't a student. He had just graduated. And it was like day 3 of being a new CRNA at Duke. How great is this? And someone anonymously sent me a picture of a text that he posted saying, I'm so bored. I'm just sitting here listening to the beep, beep, beep. I terminated him that day.
Wow. Yeah.
Who needs that?
No,
And
nobody.
Duke supported that. Who
Good.
needs that? 3 days out of school, he's bored, sitting here listening to the beep, 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 obviously on his phone.
Well, and social media is the devil.
it's
Anybody
the
that's stupid enough to put that out.
It's the devil. And I can't tell it enough to students, to young CRNAs, do not pull the phone out.
Yeah.
Social media has really destroyed a lot. Well, I mean, that's another topic for another whole day.
Yeah.
But,
But Gary, did you ask about when a student is flailing that they're not able to?
No, not that they're flailing. Is so, they're having these tensions with their preceptor because the preceptor is not supportive, or they're bashing them, or they're not inviting.
I misunderstood your first question. Okay.
How do you run that up the chain? Because they're not going to address the preceptor directly, and then. What if you have a leadership structure that isn't even open to listening to that feedback from the students? Because now we have all these different hierarchies, right? You got the physician CRNA, you've got perhaps the surgeon CRNA, the circulator CRNA, you have the CRNA to CRNA, you have the student to the CRNA precept. I mean, it's complicated.
The program director to the CRNA.
The program director to the CRNA, yes. So, I mean,
we had this a lot.
Yeah.
At one hospital, I won't name it. And it happened so often. Students were kicked out of the room. I mean, there was one situation where this first semester in the clinical area, this older guy was going through anesthesia school, and he told the CRNA, "You're just a woman. I don't have to listen to you."
Wow.
She escorted him out of the room pretty quickly, and I could understand that. But there's so many times students are just trying to learn. They're
Absolutely.
So terrified. But whenever they got into trouble with a preceptor, they would go to the director of the anesthesia program. And it happens so often that they're really, at least from my point of view, I wasn't involved with it at that time. They didn't do a lot. They let the student come back into the clinical area. I don't know what conversations were had between the director and the precepting CRNA, but there was a problem a lot with this group of CRNAs at this one place. It was just awful how punitive they were. So I would never have made it through school.
So that sets up.
If they had been my preceptors, because I wasn't cool. I wasn't, and I was so nervous. You could smell it on me. And it was like a lion waiting in the bush. They saw one drop of perspiration and they'd pounce.
I just got a little PTSD right there.
I'm so sorry.
I'm thinking about, this was my very first preceptor when I was in school 30,000 years ago. And she was, I'm going to say it, evil.
I had
She
one.
would put tape on the floor of where she wanted the wheels of the anesthesia machine. She had actually a schematic of how she wanted your syringes set up. And let me tell you, you're a brand new CRNA. I could barely get the circuit untwisted, not in a million knots. And back then we were assigned one preceptor like per semester. You didn't rotate. So I couldn't escape. And I had to go to the program director and plead to have another. And she was the program director. Is like, why? And yeah, PTSD right there, folks.
Are you a resident or CRNA looking to transition into independent practice? The AANA and Beyond the Mask are here to help you thrive as your own boss. Introducing the 1099 CRNA Institute, taught by Beyond the Mask host Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce. This comprehensive educational series provides detailed guidance on business structure, legal and tax implications, and financial management tailored specifically for 1099 CRNAs. Enroll now and earn valuable continuing education credits as you chart a new course in your rewarding career. Visit aana.com/1099 to learn more and take the first step toward your new future. Remember, that's aana.com/1099 or click the link in the description of today's show. The 1099 CRNA Institute. Thrive as your own boss.
So let's kind of pivot into difficult conversations and accountability. And we've kind of covered a little bit on difficult conversations, but there are frameworks out there, and holding people accountable is extremely uncomfortable. We all know that. And in fact, there's a lot of people that actually circumvent or try to escape it, and allows it to fester, which is problem number one, not addressing accountability. And, quite honestly, I think this is why focused professional performance evaluation, FPPE, and ongoing professional performance evaluation, OPPE, which are Joint Commission requirements through medical staff offices. I think the way, or the rationale why they came to inception, is because a lot of physician leadership would never hold their colleagues accountable, right? And then it got deferred onto medical staff office credentialing committees, to where peers that were non-direct reports would listen and then decide whether they would move somebody on to FPPE or suspend them, etc. Pretty laborious process, not efficient, not optimal. But one of the frameworks there, I think, is obviously when you sit somebody down, whether it's immediate or whether it's in a safe place, if you will, in private, you describe that behavior. And then when that behavior is described, the impact that behavior has on either the individual or individuals, and then you set the expectation for that individual. And obviously, that's the formal leader. And actually, you can do that informally too, is saying that, Lynn, I mean, you talk about the cardiac surgeon, and it's like, look, here's your behavior, the way you're interacting with the nurses here in the operating room, who actually look after your back and do the stuff that you need done for you to be successful. That's number one. Number two is the impact on them is they're never going to speak up if you're going to make mistakes. So Marty McCrary he was Johns Hopkins, I guess, liver surgeon, deconstructed hierarchy and said that everybody in the room must must interact with each other by first name only, right? That's a culture shift because of the hierarchy of, here's a world infamous liver surgeon, and the scrub is passing off instruments to him, and the scrub sees a mistake and is afraid to say Dr. McCrary versus Marty. Don't do that. You're about to, X, Y, and Z. Level setting, and that sets up the expectations. Question, how do you navigate power differentials then? I mean, we have it in anesthesia, the doc, CRNA. I think not everybody sees it as a power differential, but they certainly exist. How do you manage that when you see conflict?
Everybody's just people to me, whether you're the guy sweeping the floor or the surgeon cutting through a big artery in the liver. It's that analogy of how horrible airplane crashes have happened because the guy sitting in the jump seat was too intimidated to speak to the pilot to tell them what was wrong. Every really brilliant surgeon I've worked with invite conversation, invite stopping for time out. And if they're talking, then you stop doing time out. You wait. Okay, we'll go as soon as you finish talking, and you do it nicely and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Respectful.
I don't care what role you play. We're all people, but the bottom line is we're all people trying to take good care of this patient.
Yeah.
So if you're screaming and yelling at that scrub and you're making her cry and she hands you the wrong thing or pushes some button and somebody can get hurt, none of that is workable. So we all need to stand up to each other. And if I ever make a mistake, I used to tell my students that I'm not perfect. You see me do something, talk to me. I always can learn.
Right.
I don't care how long I've done something. I learn stuff from my students all the time.
Yep, absolutely.
Meri. But we have to be able to talk to each other without that fear, because I don't want the damn plane to crash.
Right. Absolutely.
I don't want harm to come to the patient.
Meri, thoughts?
100%, Lynn. Couldn't have said it better. Without communication, if you think about everything that we've been discussing for the last hour here, it really does come down to communication.
Oh, yeah.
And how to communicate with each other.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like that if you're doing the pie chart of what's important, communication to me would take up, 80% of that chart.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I mean, that sets the precedent for civility versus incivility, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And I give absolute respect to that surgeon, but I also give absolute respect to that housekeeper scrubbing the floor. Everybody's doing their job. We're all doing it together to take care of our patient.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, simple things, at the end of a case, I'll quickly just throw my circuit in the garbage. And I guess not everybody does that.
Right.
And I literally had a scrub tech come up to me and say, we have an anesthesia tech that changes over the rooms, but they get busy. And he's like, I work at night. And he's like, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you throwing your circuit and your suction out before you leave the room. Thank you so much. I'm like, oh my God, you're so welcome.
That's lovely. And thanking people and say, yes, by
That's
name.
my night.
Yep.
Like, you're so welcome, and then I'm thinking, why doesn't everybody do that? You've walked into rooms where it's just a nightmare. And, there's things thrown all over the place. You open the top drawer and there's a million drugs. And, why? That's so disrespectful. So disrespectful to leave a mess for the next person. So.
Absolutely. And speaking of strategies to kind of de-escalate some of that stuff too, and where it starts, and we'll get into cultural respect a little bit here. But the simple little things of the cordial communication with one another, holding each other accountable respectfully is paramount, obviously. I'll share an example. I shared this with our class there a couple weeks ago. I made assignments one day, and one of the probably least favored sites was MRI with pediatrics, right? Little wee ones, little tykes.
I believe I told that story earlier.
I get that.
You're about as far away from help as you can get.
But I had this one CRNA who required a little bit more attention than most people, which is fine. I mean, that's her characteristics. But comes in all bowed up in front of me, and who's giving me, and cursing, like, why am I getting this assignment? Like it was a penalty, right? And so I let the individual vent, and I looked at them and I said, look, I have limited people that have the experience and the skill set like you to be able to do these cases today. And I'm sorry I have to, I put you there. I probably should have communicated sooner, but I need you there today because you are the best person to be in that environment today. And it's not a penalty. It's because I need your skill set there. You're an expert in this. And you could watch sort of the deflation of the chest, and they weren't all bowed up anymore. And so I think what I learned from that situation is I need to do a better job of, obviously, is to acknowledge people's strengths before you have to leverage them, right? Is to say, hey, look, this is probably not an optimal assignment tomorrow, but you're the one that I need to do it for these reasons, right? And making sure that they realize that they have value. And that's basically is just setting as like they're valued, right? When they show up. And I think they do a better job because now they're actually proud that somebody acknowledged and recognized their strength and what they bring to the table. It's certainly
just everything that they do that day. And the way that they do it.
Right.
I'm needed here. He believes in me. And
Right,
it's wonderful when you get positive feedback like that.
Oh, absolutely. Long as they don't take it on the tangent. Oh, by the way, I'm the person. All right.
I mean, the example that I was just sharing with you guys about the anesthesiologist couldn't get the epidural.
Yeah.
And I went up and got it. I mean, that was just a great day. You know what I mean? I felt so needed and respected and valued for my skills. And then I needed him to help me with an intubation, and 30 years later, I'm like, you are amazing. That was an amazing intubation. Yeah. Like, put the cape on, you're a superhero. Right. You got the hot dog out of the throat. Congratulations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it was just awesome.
Yeah. And, and taking that a step further is leaving for the day or the evening and communicating with your team saying like, thank you for a great day. I hope you have a safe, whatever the little, words of encouragement, and being intentional about that is to say like, hey, we went through some rough stuff today, but thank you for being by my side, right? It pivots that conversation, right?
Huge.
And people then start to look out for you. And I tell you, so I intentionally do that with my team when I'm working with them. And I can't even remember what the scenario was, but somebody was trying to throw me on their bus. Fine. We're human. All right. That doc stood up and said, that might have been a one-off, but I work with Gary a lot, and I don't believe what you're saying. That was profound. And that doc came back to me and had told me what was going on before it even got onto my radar. And I said, thank you so much. I said, I feel the same way about you. I mean, we gel, we work well together. And I think forming those teams with that sort of explicit and perhaps maybe implicit support for one another and the communication are the root of how we start to pivot and change culture and start to act civil with one another. It's okay to have a bad day. I came in, it was about 6 months ago. I was working with a newer physician. All right, let's get to creating a culture of respect and talk a little bit about setting behavioral norms, and perhaps when do you do that in the work environment? And maybe, Meri, you've had a little bit more experience with this because of onboarding people and leading some large groups.
It's funny, Gary, that as I got more tenured in my chief roles, Lord knows I've hired 50,000 people. Fortunately, haven't fired that much, but hired a lot of people. And if you're walking into the office for an interview, I'm going to have to assume that you know how to give anesthesia, or you're a new grad and you're ready to give anesthesia. I would not focus on the clinical aspect. I 100% focus on how you are talking to me.
Yeah.
I can tell, and I got so good at it, and I don't want to, I do this whole thing about, and you can bleep this out, I don't know, Gary, I do this whole thing about recognizing assholes,
Yeah.
But I can tell as soon as you sit down with me how this is going to go, what type of provider, and what are you going to bring to my team as far as behavior, attitude, and culture.
Yeah.
So even at the beginning, first breath, I really, and the other thing I want to do is I want to challenge anybody who's listening to this. If we could all just get up tomorrow, go to work, and say one truly heartfelt, positive thing about anybody in your OR, wouldn't that be a great day?
Yeah.
So little challenge for all the listeners.
Absolutely.
Love this podcast stuff. Love it.
Well, one of the things that I do in the morning too is if I leave before the team is in the room to go see the patient, I come back and I'm like, oh my God, Joanne, oh my God, Brian, we got the A team to, and you try to get that positive energy going so that people is like, oh, he actually recognized me, right?
If nothing else,
their names.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, as you're leaving the room, thanks, you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's not the end of the day.
Yeah.
Every time I leave the room, I'm like, thanks, you guys. See you next case.
Yeah. Great work. You guys are awesome. Yep. It starts there. Lynn.
Yes, let's all try it.
Thoughts?
I totally agree. It's knowing people's names, all the players, from the guy that comes in and moves this bed out to put this bed in, and just trying to get out of their way and putting on the arm board, like you said, and trying to help somebody else with their job. If I have the time. If I don't, then I stay focused on what I need to. But
Sure.
I always try to incorporate just getting to know the people in my room and thanking them. Everybody works together so much better when it's a happy place like that.
Absolutely.
100%.
I mean, it really speaks to like setting behavioral norms. It's not just, Meri, you talked about onboarding people, like behavioral interview questions to help set what that expectation is and be able to tease out what the behavioral norms for the culture that you're trying to set in that organization, as well as staff meetings. But I think, Lynn, to your point, when we're in the operating room, that we also set those behavioral norms, both explicit and implicitly, through the way we show up every single day. Because, it's like I told students I was teaching there last week before, you're a leader and you're going to set the tempo in the room most of the time.
Right.
It may not.
And we're a team.
I'm
not more important just because I'm a CRNA.
Right. Exactly.
You're important for what you do. The doc's important for what they do. It's about showing respect to everybody. And I'm not trying to sound like a simpleton. It's just about showing grace.
Absolutely.
And being appreciative.
One of your bullets on your outline, Gary, is normalization of disrespect.
Yes.
Well, normalization of disrespect is not normal.
Correct. Right.
It should never be the norm.
Yeah.
Think about normalization of disrespect.
Should never accept it.
Never.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Again, we only can control ourselves, so got to take accountability for what we do and say.
Well, and I think too is, as people sit there, self-reflect, take your accountability for yourself, that starts to set, if we all did that, and then how we show up in front of others and how we interact with each other in a professional manner and motivational manner, it pivots the entire culture. We have one plastic surgeon that we work with, and he comes in. I have never met such a positive person. And he comes in and he's like, oh my God, I can't believe I've got the A-team in here. Is same sort of scenario, right? He's like, how long has it been since we worked together? And before you can even spit anything out, he says, it's too long, way too long. Like, you need to be in my room more, right? All right, Meri, 3 things that you think people should do as a takeaway from this podcast when they go to work tomorrow to show up as a better person, as a better CRNA?
So I think the first thing is, when you open your eyes in the morning, that everybody should make a conscious decision to just have a good day.
Yeah.
Okay. And if something is really going on at work, you got to write it down. It will fester and fester until you become the toxic person that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
It just, if something is wrong at work, you got to talk to somebody. Staying in silence, like Lynn said, try to deal with it, normal person to person. And if that doesn't work, you go up the chain. You make a concerted effort to really put that to rest, because it will ruin you and your day. And that's the last thing you want. And the last thing I think that we've hit on is just communicate. Just communicate. And remember, such a huge part of what we do has to do with emotional intelligence. And people are looking for that. People are craving that. And, this is why the doctoral program now, all our programs are they really deal with emotional intelligence and all the leadership skills, where, just without that doctorate program, I don't know how many of us were really pushed into the world with a lot of leadership skills. I know I was not.
Yep.
And, the doctoral program is so huge for breeding great leaders. And I'm hoping that we all see a change and just can get a good leadership, and communicate. That's what I'm going to leave with.
Awesome. Lynn, 3 things that you could impart to our listeners.
I think being kind and
Love it.
speaking the truth, but being kind, knowing people's names, thanking them, appreciating what we bring to the dance. We don't always need applause. There's a beautiful sunrise every morning, and how many of us sleep through it? So not everybody has to acknowledge the good things I do, because I know the gifts I bring to the dance, and my personal relationship with my patients, I think, is so important. Getting them to laugh. I used to do a thing where I'd get these really nervous young men, and I'd lean down and I say, listen, you got to have this done, right? You're here to have it done. But I want you to know that when you're asleep, I'm going to be there every second and I'm going to take amazing care of you. And when you wake up at the end of the case and you don't even think you've had your surgery, I'm going to ask you one question. Who's your daddy? And you have to say, you're my daddy. And I had several patients, I didn't even have to ask them. They're like, oh, you're my daddy. And I got called into the pre-op one day, and there was a visitor there, asking for the who's your daddy anesthesia provider. So I go out there, and his wife's now having surgery, and he goes, we asked for you.
Oh my God.
So they gave me a who's your daddy farewell party when I retired in
Oh my
black
God.
t-shirts. Who's your daddy?
That's the best.
That's
Can I
awesome.
use that? I'm using that. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But patients are terrified.
Yes.
Their butts hanging out. It's cold. They don't know what's going on. They can't understand half the things we say. They're separated from the people that they love. And we need to let them know that it's okay. And we're going to be there. We're going to take great care of them. And the same people, like you said, you never know what people are going through. People always call me sunshine. And if they knew I always think, if they knew how many drugs I was on.
Gary.
They calling me that.
God.
But I just try to be upbeat and I try to be thankful. And I just appreciate the people that are all trying to take care of the patient and me and the surgeon and everybody else.
Oh, Gary, I want to add one more word. I forgot
Yes.
a word. Humble.
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge
That's
one.
one of my favorite words.
Absolutely.
We were all new at one time. Be nice to these poor students.
Humble.
Yeah.
You don't know who's going to be putting you under anesthesia tomorrow. Could be
Yep.
that student that just graduated that you treated like shit.
Or it could be your future boss.
Or it could be your future boss. That's right. So there you go.
Awesome insight, Meri
Yes.
and Lynn. This was outstanding. A few tidbits for our audience in creating a culture of respect for one another and the teams that we work with. I want to thank our audience for joining us today on this podcast. We will have an episode 3 similarly, and that will focus really on looking at the mental health of positivity and strength-based growth for a nurse anesthetist themselves. But until we get there, we ask that you go on over to that website called Beyond the Mask and go to the clinical edition where you can look at this podcast or look at any other podcast with Anesthesia Alchemy, Lynn and Garry Unplugged. Give us a like, give us a comment, make some suggestions. Until next time, we'll see you. Thank you.